December 27, 1942. Port Moresby, New Guinea. The morning sun stretched long shadows across steel matting as ground crews pulled camouflage netting from strange silhouettes. 12 Lockheed P-38F Lightnings sat fueled and armed, their twin tails gleaming in tropical dawn. Intelligence reports crackled through the ready room. Major Japanese air raid developing, 40 aircraft approaching Buna. Fighter escort confirmed. Time to intercept, 30 minutes. Captain Thomas Lynch checked his instruments and signaled his flight. Among his pilots was Second Lieutenant Richard Bong, a farm boy from Poplar, Wisconsin, temporarily attached from the 49th Fighter Group. What none of them knew was that this morning would mark the beginning of a fundamental shift in Pacific air combat. The Japanese pilots approaching Buna had encountered these twin-boomed fighters only briefly in previous weeks. Their intelligence reports remained uncertain about the strange aircraft's capabilities. Within hours, that uncertainty would transform into shocked recognition. For 13 months, Imperial Japanese Navy pilots had dominated Pacific skies. The Mitsubishi A6M0 had become the nightmare of Allied aviators. Turn radius of 950 feet. Climb rate to 6,000 feet in 7 minutes. Maximum speed of 331 miles per hour. These statistics had translated into overwhelming victory from China to the Dutch East Indies. American pilots in their Bell P-39 Airacobras and Curtiss P-40 Warhawks had learned through blood that engaging a Zero in a turning fight meant almost certain death. But the Lightning represented something different, something the Japanese had never faced, something that would change everything. The statistics told a story of absolute dominance. Since Pearl Harbor, Japanese naval aviation had swept across the Pacific like a typhoon. Their pilots were veterans of China campaigns, men with thousands of combat hours. The Zero could outturn any Allied fighter, climb faster, and maintain maneuverability at altitudes where American aircraft struggled. Curtiss P-40 pilots had developed desperate tactics: never turn with a Zero. Dive away if possible. Use superior diving speed for hit-and-run attacks. But even these measures offered limited protection. Japanese pilots simply waited above, patient and confident, knowing their opponents would eventually make a mistake. The Bell P-39 Airacobra proved even more vulnerable. Its Allison engine lost power rapidly above 12,000 feet. The Zero could climb above effective opposition range, then dive at will. American pilots died in horrifying numbers during the early months. Their aircraft was simply outclassed. Grumman F-4F Wildcats fared slightly better through sheer ruggedness, but remained inferior in almost every performance category. The psychological impact devastated Allied morale. Pilots reported feeling hunted from the moment they took off. The knowledge that superior enemy fighters waited somewhere above created constant dread. Some pilots refused combat assignments. Others completed single missions and requested transfers to non-flying duties. Japanese pilots, conversely, flew with supreme confidence. They knew their aircraft advantages, trusted their training, and believed in inevitable victory. Combat reports reflected this certainty. Individual Japanese pilots regularly engaged multiple Allied fighters simultaneously, achieving remarkable kill ratios. The American situation appeared hopeless. Without equivalent fighter performance, air superiority remained impossible. Without air superiority, ground and naval operations suffered catastrophic losses. Something had to change. Lockheed's answer to Japanese dominance rolled off assembly lines in Burbank, California, with specifications that seemed impossible. Twin Allison V. 1,710 engines, each producing 1,150 horsepower. Turbo superchargers maintaining power at altitudes where other fighters gasped. Maximum speed of 414 miles per hour, service ceiling of 44,000 feet, and concentrated in the nose, devastating armament, 120mm Hispano cannon, and 450 caliber Browning machine guns, all firing straight ahead without convergence problems. Lieutenant Richard Bong had studied these numbers during training at Hamilton Field. The farm boy who learned to fly in civilian pilot training programs understood something crucial. The Lightning's advantage lay not in turning with zeros, but in avoiding the turning fight altogether. Speed, altitude, firepower. Strike from above, dive through the enemy formation, climb back to altitude using excess speed. These tactics demanded discipline, patience, and complete rejection of traditional dogfighting instincts. Most pilots spent years learning to turn inside their opponents. The Lightning required them to unlearn everything. Training officers repeated the mantra constantly. Altitude is life insurance. Speed is life. Never turn with the enemy. Use your advantages. The concept seemed cowardly to some pilots raised on tales of World War I dogfights. But combat reports from experienced Lightning pilots told a different story. Vertical tactics worked. Japanese fighters couldn't follow the dives, couldn't catch the climbs, couldn't escape the concentrated firepower. Bong absorbed every lesson. He practiced high-speed dives until the maneuvers became instinctive. He trained his gunnery at ranges exceeding 400 yards. He studied zero performance limitations obsessively. When his orders arrived for the Southwest Pacific, Bong was ready to test theory against reality. At 18,000 feet, Captain Lynch held every advantage. Below, the Japanese formation flew in standard escort pattern, confident and unsuspecting. Lynch pushed his Lightning into a dive that rapidly exceeded 400 miles per hour. Behind him, Bong and other pilots selected targets. The concentrated nose-mounted weapons allowed engagement at ranges Japanese pilots had never experienced. Lynch's guns destroyed a Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar in the opening pass. The Japanese fighter simply disintegrated under 20mm cannon shells and 50 caliber bullets. As Lynch climbed back to altitude, Zero pilots attempted to follow. Their aircraft began shuddering violently as airspeed approached 400 miles per hour. Warning bells sounded. Structural limits approached. The strange twin-boomed fighter kept accelerating. Bong spotted a Zero attempting to engage Lynch and rolled into a deflection shot. His first combat burst found its mark. The Zero spun earthward trailing flames. As Bong pulled up, 3 more Zeros converged on his position. He pushed throttles forward and dove away, accelerating past 450 miles per hour. The Japanese pilots could only watch as he disappeared. Pulling out just above jungle canopy, Bong spotted a Val dive bomber recovering from its attack run. A short burst from 100 yards sent it crashing in flames. 2 victories in his first combat engagement. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. The 39th Squadron claimed 12 Japanese aircraft destroyed. No Lightnings were lost. Japanese after-action reports expressed confusion and alarm. Pilots described aircraft possessing impossible speed and climbing ability, engaging from beyond normal combat range. The comfortable world of horizontal maneuvering combat had suddenly become a vertical battlefield, where speed and altitude determined survival. This transformation sent shockwaves through Japanese Naval Aviation Headquarters at Rabaul. Japanese intelligence officers scrambled to reassess Lightning capabilities. The twin-engine configuration had led them to categorize it as a heavy fighter, unsuitable for air-to-air combat. They hadn't anticipated American engineers creating something entirely new, a fighter achieving superiority through vertical maneuvering rather than horizontal agility. The technical revolution became increasingly clear through subsequent encounters. Lightning turbo superchargers maintained full power at altitudes where normally aspirated engines lost 50% output. Its diving speed approached the sound barrier faster than any Japanese aircraft could follow without structural failure. Its ability to convert speed into altitude meant Lightning pilots regained their perch above enemy formations within seconds. On January 7, 1943, the reality became undeniable. 9 Lightning's escorting bombers encountered approximately 20 Japanese fighters. Traditional doctrine suggested outnumbered Americans should adopt defensive positions. Instead, the Lightnings climbed to 25,000 feet and initiated diving attacks from positions Japanese fighters couldn't reach. Bong, now flying regularly with the 39th Squadron, demonstrated lethal efficiency. Diving from altitude, he destroyed a P-43 Oscar with deflection shot at 300 yards. As Japanese fighters attempted climbing toward him, Bong executed a chandelle, carrying him back to 20,000 feet, completely outside their engagement envelope. From this perch, he selected another target and repeated the process. The geometry of vertical combat was something Japanese pilots had never encountered. While a Zero could outturn any American fighter, it couldn't match lightning speed in a dive without catastrophic structural failure. Couldn't follow the zoom climb without stalling. Couldn't catch a Lightning choosing to disengage using superior speed. Veteran Japanese pilots struggled desperately to adapt, but their entire training emphasized close-range maneuvering combat. By February 1943, Lightning presence expanded rapidly across the Southwest Pacific. The 9th Fighter Squadron finally received their aircraft. The 80th Fighter Squadron transitioned from P-39 seconds. The 475th Fighter Group, an all-Lightning unit, formed in Australia. Each new squadron studied combat reports from pilots like Lynch and Bong, refining tactics, maximizing Lightning advantages. Training programs emphasized altitude discipline above everything. Altitude is life insurance became the absolute mantra. Speed is life. Pilots learned, resisting instinct, to turn with enemy fighters, instead maintaining high velocity and using vertical maneuvers. The high-speed yo-yo allowed Lightnings to convert excess speed into altitude while reversing direction. The barrel roll attack used Lightning roll rate to maintain guns on target while preserving momentum. Japanese attempts to counter these tactics proved largely ineffective. The Kawasaki Ki-61 Tony, designed specifically to engage high-altitude American bombers, still couldn't match Lightning performance above 20,000 feet. The Nakajima Ki-44 Shoki emphasized speed and climb rate over maneuverability, but fell short of Lightning capabilities. Intelligence reports from Japanese units revealed growing desperation. Pilots were instructed avoiding combat with Lightnings unless possessing overwhelming numerical superiority and advantageous position. Even then, engagement was discouraged above 15,000 feet, where Lightning performance advantage became insurmountable. Some units attempted luring Lightnings into low-altitude turning fights, but American pilots maintained discipline, refusing engagement on unfavorable terms. The industrial dynamics compounded Japan's tactical disadvantage. Lockheed's production line achieved remarkable efficiency. By March 1943, the factory produced 10 Lightnings daily. Japanese aircraft production, constrained by material shortages and bombing damage, struggled replacing combat losses. The arithmetic of attrition warfare had become inexorable. Training disparities widened the gap catastrophically. American Lightning pilots arrived in theater with 300 or more flight hours, including 50 hours in type. They practiced vertical tactics, gunnery, and formation flying extensively. Many trained against captured Japanese aircraft, understanding exactly their opponent's capabilities and limitations. Japanese replacement pilots rushed through programs shortened from 2 years to 6 months, arrived with minimal combat preparation. Most averaged less than 100 total flight hours. Many had never flown above 20,000 feet before encountering Lightnings in combat. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea, in March 1943, demonstrated Lightning's strategic impact. Lightnings flew top cover for Allied bombers, attacking a major Japanese convoy. When Zero escorts rose to intercept, Lightnings executed perfect vertical tactics, destroying multiple Japanese fighters while preventing effective convoy defense. 8 transport ships and 4 destroyers sank, dealing crushing blows to Japanese reinforcement efforts. Among Lightning pilots establishing dominance, several names became legendary. Captain Thomas Lynch refined vertical tactics to an art form, eventually scoring 20 confirmed victories before his death in March 1944. Lieutenant Richard Bong continued his remarkable scoring streak, demonstrating uncanny ability to position his Lightning for perfect deflection shots. In August 1943, a new name entered the ace roster. Lieutenant Thomas Maguire, assigned to the newly formed 475th Fighter Group, scored his first victories on August 18th over WWII. Flying top cover for bombers, Maguire's flight encountered approximately 20 Japanese fighters. In his first combat engagement, Maguire shot down 2 Key 43 Oscars and 1 Key 61 Tony, becoming an ace within days. Maguire's combat philosophy emphasized aggressive vertical tactics and precise gunnery. On April 18, 1943, Lightning's unique capabilities enabled one of the war's most significant missions. American codebreakers intercepted Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's travel itinerary for an inspection tour of Solomon Islands bases. The mission to intercept him required a 435-mile overwater flight from Guadalcanal, precise navigation without landmarks, and exact timing to arrive when Yamamoto's aircraft passed through. Only the Lightning possessed the range, speed, and navigation equipment for such a mission. Major John Mitchell of the 339th Fighter Squadron led 16 Lightnings on the longest fighter intercept mission of the war. Flying at wave-top height, avoiding radar detection, maintaining radio silence throughout, the Lightnings navigated by dead reckoning for over 2 hours. Mitchell's navigation proved perfect. At 9:34, exactly as planned, Yamamoto's 2 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers appeared with their 6 Zero escorts. Captain Thomas Lanphier Jr. and Lieutenant Rex Barber rolled into attack as top cover engaged escorts. Barber's concentrated fire sent the Admiral's bomber crashing into jungle, killing Japan's most brilliant naval strategist and dealing devastating blow to Japanese morale. The psychological impact rippled through Japanese military leadership. If American fighters could reach across hundreds of miles of ocean with such precision, no one was safe. The myth of Japanese invincibility, already damaged by Midway and Guadalcanal, suffered another crushing blow. The Lightning had demonstrated not just tactical superiority, but strategic reach Japanese planners hadn't anticipated. Following Yamamoto's death, Japanese fighter tactics underwent desperate revision. Pilots were instructed attacking Lightnings only when possessing altitude advantage, numerical superiority of at least 3-1. And surprise, even then, engagement was to be brief, with immediate disengagement if initial attack failed. By December 1943, Lockheed had delivered over 2,000 Lightnings to combat theaters. Monthly production exceeded 400 aircraft. Each Lightning required approximately 37,000 man-hours to construct. But American industrial capacity made this investment sustainable. Japanese production of all fighter types barely reached 500 monthly, and many were retained in home islands for defense. The arithmetic of attrition warfare had become inexorable. Japanese aircraft appearing in late 1943 failed restoring balance. The Kawasaki Ki 84 Frank could match Lightning speed at medium altitudes, but still couldn't compete above 25,000 feet. The Mitsubishi J2M Raiden emphasized climb rate and high-altitude performance, but sacrificed range and maneuverability. By November 1943, transformation was complete. Japanese daylight operations over the Solomons had virtually ceased. Naval vessels moved only under darkness cover. Supply runs to forward bases were conducted by submarines and fast destroyers in nighttime dashes. The proud Japanese Naval Air Force that swept across the Pacific in 1941–42 had been reduced to furtive defensive operations. The statistics told a stark story. Since significant Lightning operations began, Japanese fighter units in the Solomons and New Guinea suffered catastrophic losses. The 251st Air Group, which began 1943 with 80 pilots, had only 10 original members surviving by year's end. The 204th Air Group lost 70% of its pilots in 6 months. The 582nd Air Group was withdrawn from combat entirely after losing 80% of aircraft in 4 months of operations against Lightning-equipped American units. American losses, while not insignificant, were sustainable. Richard Bong exemplified the confidence Lightning gave American pilots. By April 1944, he had surpassed Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26 victories. His combat technique had evolved to near perfection. Bong would climb to 30,000 feet, beyond reach of any Japanese fighter, then select targets carefully. His attacks were swift, precise, and lethal. He averaged less than 100 rounds fired per victory, demonstrating remarkable gunnery skill. Bong's eventual total of 40 confirmed victories, all scored in Lightnings, represented not just personal skill, but systematic superiority. His victims included veteran Japanese aces who simply couldn't counter Lightning performance advantages. In one engagement over Hollandia, Bong shot down 3 Japanese fighters in less than 5 minutes, using perfect vertical tactics that left opponents unable to respond. Thomas Maguire pushed Lightning capabilities even further. His manual on combat tactics became doctrine throughout Pacific theater. Maguire emphasized importance of mutual support, with Lightning elements working in coordinated vertical scissors that trapped Japanese fighters between multiple attacking Lightnings. His eventual 38 victories, scored between August 1943 and January 1945, demonstrated lethal efficiency of properly executed tactics. The technological evolution of Lightning continued throughout the campaign. The G model introduced improved turbo superchargers, maintaining power above 30,000 feet. The H model featured upgraded engines producing 1,425 horsepower each. The J model relocated intercoolers to engine booms, improving pilot visibility and high-altitude performance. The L model added hydraulically boosted ailerons, dramatically improving roll rate. Each improvement shifted combat equation further in America's favor. By late 1944, there was literally nothing a Japanese fighter could do better than a Lightning L model. The Philippines campaign of late 1944 demonstrated Lightning matured capabilities. Lightning squadrons achieved air superiority over Leyte within days of invasion. Japanese attempts to reinforce by air resulted in catastrophic losses. In one engagement on November 2, 1944, Lightnings of the 49th Fighter Group destroyed 26 Japanese aircraft without loss. Such one-sided victories had become routine. Strategic bombing campaign against Japanese bases was enabled by Lightning Escort, B-24. Liberators could reach targets throughout Southwest Pacific, knowing Lightning Escorts would protect them. Japanese interceptors, unable to reach bomber altitude when Lightnings were present, were reduced to ineffective attacks on margins. Air bases, fuel depots, and supply centers were systematically destroyed. By early 1945, Japanese air power in Southwest Pacific had effectively ceased to exist. The few remaining experienced pilots had been withdrawn to defend home islands. Replacement pilots with minimal training and obsolete aircraft were sacrificed in futile defensive actions. The Lightning had achieved not just air superiority, but air supremacy. The human cost differential was staggering. Between December 1942 and January 1945, Lightning units in Southwest Pacific claimed over 1,500 Japanese aircraft destroyed in verified combat. American Lightning losses to enemy action totaled fewer than 200 aircraft. The kill ratio exceeded 7-1, unprecedented in aerial warfare. Beyond statistics, Lightning impact was transformational. It proved technological superiority, properly employed, could overcome numerical disadvantage and enemy experience. It demonstrated air superiority was not about dogfighting, but about controlling engagement parameters. It showed industrial capacity and training systems were as important as courage and skill. The revolution it began in those desperate battles continues influencing aerial warfare today. Veterans on both sides remembered the Lightning with mixture of awe and respect. American pilots praised its versatility, reliability, and overwhelming performance advantages. Japanese pilots recalled it as the aircraft that ended their dominance. The twin-boomed devil that could not be caught or escaped. Ground crews appreciated its rugged construction and maintainability despite complex systems. The influence extended beyond World War II. Lightning's success influenced post-war fighter development worldwide. The concept of vertical maneuvering became fundamental to jet-age combat. The importance of altitude and speed over turning ability shaped designs from the F-86 Sabre to modern fifth-generation fighters. The integration of technology, tactics, and training that Lightning exemplified became the template for Air Force development. Lockheed's design team, led by Clarence Kelly Johnson, had created more than just a successful fighter. They revolutionized aerial warfare. Lightning's unique configuration, born from need to house two engines and turbo superchargers, produced capabilities single-engine fighters couldn't match. Its concentrated nose armament eliminated convergence problems plaguing wing-mounted guns. Its twin-engine redundancy provided safety over vast Pacific distances. The pilots who flew Lightning wrote their own chapter in aviation history. Richard Bong's 40 victories stood as the American record for aerial combat. Thomas Maguire's 38 victories and tactical innovations influenced fighter doctrine for generations. The transformation from December 1942 to early 1945 was complete and irreversible. The skies that belonged to the Zero now belonged to the Lightning. Japanese naval aviation, which began the war as perhaps the world's most capable air force, had been systematically destroyed. In the final analysis, lightning impact transcended mere victory. It represented American industrial democracy's answer to military authoritarianism. The twin-boomed fighter that Japanese pilots initially dismissed had changed the nature of aerial warfare forever.